we work with business owners, right? So it hits all of those areas of kind of like, how do I want to feel like a lawyer today? It's like later today, I actually have a court hearing. Right?
Oh.
Which is, so that's when you really feel like a lawyer. You're
Definitely.
sitting in front of a judge.
Yes,
right?
I would think that would do.
But that ability to work with individuals and families or closely held businesses, I think, is what attracted me to the Trust and Estates Group. And I think the counseling side certainly gave me some of that push.
That's great. That's probably a really good background.
Yeah, I think it comes in handy.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for everybody that's tuning in to Touchstone Talks. We have Michael Clear from Wigan and Dana that's joining us. He's a trust and estate attorney. And we're going to learn a little bit about what that is.
Yeah,
so
great. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation.
We talk to business owners, right, on my side, and constantly say, do you have a trust set up? Are you prepared, right? We're working to prepare to maximize what they're getting when they sell and exit their business. So how does a trust help with that? Maybe let's even back up a step. Mm-hmm. What is a trust?
Oof, man. So, what is a trust? We're going to be here for 15 hours. I think it's great.
I don't think we have 15 hours.
So quickly, generally we have two types of trusts. A trust that is what I'll call it a death trust, a testamentary trust, which is a revocable trust, or an irrevocable trust, which generally involves some sort of gifting. So in a trust, we have a creator. We often call him the grantor of the trust. We have a trustee, the person who's going to become the new owner of whatever assets and be in charge of things like investments and distributions. And you have beneficiaries. You get to define who the beneficiaries are. Is it a spouse? Is it kids? Is it charity? And then you have property that you have to put in it, which is, in our case, kind of a business owner, an interest in a business.
So what advantages are there to put my business in a trust?
So from it all depends on the client's goals, right? If we're working with a business owner and we're simply organizing their affairs, owning their business in a revocable trust can help avoid probate at death and kind of make quick order of who owns the asset, not having to worry about a court intervention. On the planning side, kind of the planning for taxes or estate taxes side, the advantage is often putting a business into trust early when the value is much lower. So we use less what we would call gift tax exemption, and then letting the value grow over time, which can grow outside of somebody's taxable estate. Other advantages, though, are you're planning for a beneficiary. By doing it in a trust rather than simply giving it to them, you get some asset protection or some divorcing spouse protection.
Right.
You might have a beneficiary with special needs where we're going to draft it in a certain way, or you may just have a spendthrift beneficiary, one who can't control their spending, and we want to lock it up in a trust.
Could happen.
It happens most of the time.
I had one business owner whose mother had put the trust, had set up a trust for the three brothers in a way that was uninheritable to the spouse. He was able to dissolve the trust. Is there another reason you would want to dissolve the trust? Like, obviously, that was a personal choice that he felt that was unfair to his family. So he dissolved his trust. But that was kind of, I didn't realize you could dissolve a trust. So it depends, right? What a great lawyer. It depends. So I was talking with a client yesterday. He was like, he's not sure what he wants to do yet, right? And it's like, well, we have to make our trust flexible. In Connecticut, a trust can last for 800 years. Yeah. That's an interesting time frame.
It's a long time. Why isn't it 1,000? Why isn't it 360? Why isn't it forever? It used to be about 100. Used to be what we would call lives in being.
Right. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So anyone who went to property and law school would remember that. But so Connecticut's expanded it. 800 seems to be long enough for anybody.
8 generations, theoretically.
Yeah. I think the first Thanksgiving was less than 400 years ago. You can fact check me on that. But so our irrevocable trusts, right, that we've created, that you put that, they can often be tweaked on the edges.
Okay.
Depending on the terms of the trust, you may be able to dissolve them, right? You have trusts have distribution terms in them. Sometimes parents say, give everything to a child at age 30, right? If they're working with me, they've heard that we like lifetime trusts. They last for their lifetime. We like some asset protection terms, so we don't kick it out at specific times. Parents rarely plan for in-laws to inherit, right?
Yeah.
So it's not unusual, and that's what we tell spouses often, is it's not unusual that you were not included. Your kids would be included, and then it's kind of it might be on your spouse, if you need more liquidity, life insurance or other ways. But sometimes trusts don't make sense anymore. The current estate tax exemption that people are planning for next year is going to be $15 million a person. It's a big number.
That's a big number.
So if you have a trust with $5 million, or an asset with $5 million or $10 million, something under that, and your estate isn't taxable, and you don't have the creditor concerns or the divorcing spouse concerns, some people will try to dissolve them. I push really hard on those conversations, but if it's possible, sometimes it can be done.
Gotcha.
Whether or not it's a good idea, only time will tell.
Right. Well, our crystal ball doesn't necessarily give us the updated regulations.
The crystal ball or the magic 8 ball, it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, that estate tax exemption is at an all-time high. Right. I mean, when I started practicing, it was $2 million. It was $600,000 5 years before that. Right. Yeah. So in 25 years,
how we crept up to 15 million,
which changes the planning. It changes those irrevocable trusts. It changes the view of, do you want them?
Yeah.
So yes, so it is possible.
It makes a case for why not to establish a trust.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. My view on the planning side is you establish a trust. You provide you as a parent can provide protections to your children that they cannot provide themselves.
Fair.
So taking advantage of that by using a trust is positive planning.
Makes sense.
It's a continuum of push and pull on those distribution terms. In terms of how much control you give a beneficiary, how much things they can do alone, and that's where some of the conversation comes in. But because I really I like that asset protection, creditor protection.
Oh, I'm sure.
Divorcing spouse protection.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
We, interestingly enough, have another client who established his firm within his trust, and is now divorcing. So that's seeing the trust in play in a protective fashion has been interesting for me to watch. Probably not as interesting for him to deal with.
Yeah, probably not, right?
But from the outside, watching it do what it's supposed to do.
It can provide that layer of protection.
Right.
For sure.
Which in his mind, it is ensuring that his son has the benefit of his company versus the wife that's divorcing him.
Yeah. Which makes sense. It sounds like it served its purpose.
Exactly.
And I think kind of to that initial question of the why,
right?
Why is a trust? There's a gazillion, maybe not a gazillion, but there's plenty of reasons of why the trust, which is important kind of in the what are we doing on the planning side, but it's important 10 years later of why is the trust here, because if we hit a couple of those whys, it's great.
It makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense. Yeah. When should you talk to somebody about setting up a trust? Like, is this I set my company up and I did it this way and now I can't talk about a trust? Or I do this before I go to sale. I sell my company and then I set it up. Like, what timeline works best?
So if we're talking about planning, kind of just because we have a big of let's narrow it down in the sense that you're going to have an event that's going to create at some point you have a business that you think is going to grow in value, and then pop in value, right?
We all want to pop in value.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
I want to pop in value. The earlier, the better, right? So if you do it at the very beginning, great. You can put, if everyone's putting in $100,000, you could put one of the initial investors could be a trust. It puts it in there to puts it $100,000, and then all of the future appreciation grows inside of the trust, outside of we'll call it the grantor's estate. Which is positive. I used 100 because it's easy to multiply.
Of course.
So early better at the beginning is great. Rarely happens. That happens for somebody who's done it
before
twice.
Right.
Not even before. Right. They've done it twice. So that's the rare person. More often than not, on the transaction side, it should happen way before a transaction. Right. So like we'll talk about you have a great advisor team, right? You need an accountant, a trust and estates lawyer, your financial advisor, your business advisor in play. Your trust and estate person early in that process. A couple years would be great.
Okay.
On the flip side, so let's say they've engaged you. They're thinking about selling and they haven't done anything yet. It's not too late to do it. Right? We want to give it away or give away a portion of the business before you start your sales process would be great. If I could do it a year ahead of time or 2 years, the lower the value when I do it, the better. But even if it's, they're like, okay, next spring, we're going to start the sales process. If we look at a gifting process now, that will be early enough.
Okay.
It's just not, it wouldn't be as good as if you'd done it 2 years prior.
Right. When is it too late?
Really too late that probably you've signed that contract, right? You have a letter of intent or some sort of agreement in place, not with you as somebody who's going to help sell it, but with a buyer.
Okay.
Because then because then value is
established.
More known,
yes.
Right? It's that value.
Right.
And you're close to liquidity. So I don't get to take one of the places, both that bump in value, but also something we call a discount. We can in the valuation, which is going to be done by a qualified appraiser, not by a lawyer,
not by me either.
Not by you either, right? Get that out there right in the beginning. There are lots of qualified appraisers out there, and we use them to set the value. They're going to take a discount for lack of control and a lack of marketability, because you're not going to give away 100%.
Right.
You're not going to give away control. You're going to give away something less. But if you're about to sell, there's no lack of liquidity.
Right.
Right.
Say, no immediate liquidity.
Yeah. So we don't get that discount, which could be big. It could be, 20 to 35%, depending on the facts. It could be bigger too, depending on all the facts.
Exactly.
But to keep you reasonable in that frame. So the closer you are to a deal, the less fun we can have on the planning. So that letter of intent is really kind of like a hard, like, I have it, but I haven't signed it yet. Like, then you're just like, yeah.
Right.
It still can be done. Plenty of deals. If you talk to an owner about, their expected process, that has you, and not all deals succeed, right? You can have a letter of intent. So there's still a level of uncertainty there. But with from a planning perspective, like arguing about that level of uncertainty for a deal that actually closed doesn't do us any good.
No. Very true. Very true. We love to ask, and sometimes we don't always get the answers. We get oh yes, I'm all set with trust and estate. And then we get to the letter of intent and they're like, oh, I never actually established that.
Yes. Or I created a trust. I never put anything in it. Yeah. And it's okay. It's not necessarily the end of the world, right?
No.
Like there's still planning we can do afterwards, which is how yes, you missed an opportunity to like move more, but that doesn't mean we're done.
Right.
Right.
Right. There are still options.
There's still good planning. Even if you do nothing, one thing that's going to reduce the value of your assets is you get to pay the tax, right? You're going to pay your tax.
Right. At that point, you might as well pay the taxes on it.
But there's still planning we can do after an exit for an owner that missed the window to do phenomenal planning. And we try not to talk about what they missed.
Fair.
Right?
Right. To say, we just don't tell you that.
We don't tell you all of the good we could have done. And that's happened. I have emails to owners, every 6 months for years. And then I get the call that, hey, we have a buyer. What can we do? And
right.
It's like, we should update your base plan.
Yep.
Right.
Well, it's not, it's right up there with writing a will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a fun activity to think about.
Oh, yeah. Well, so writing the will gives you death. The gift and giving a trust and giving it away is often a loss of control.
Right.
Right. Like, and that's hard for a business owner. So
of course.
I do have to say, so a year ago, if we were talking about this, I would focus more on the changing tax landscape. Because that was pushing us to talk a lot about gifting and gifting strategies. But because the exemptions moved to $15 million next year and it's permanent,
we'll see.
We'll see, but it's never gone down, right? It's only gone up. So it's permanent, and if they're going to change it from permanent, it's not going to be in the next 3 years.
Right.
Right. We know that.
Yeah. So it's stable now.
So depending on kind of the enterprise value that you're looking at, it may or may not make sense. I was talking to someone the other day. They think they have an enterprise value of about $60 million. They own half, so that puts them at 30. But they're still in what I'd call the accumulation phase.
Right.
Right. It's all in the business. So when they go liquid, it's going to be new to them. Right,
yes, which is can go any direction.
Yeah, but they don't want to give away a bunch to kids or somebody else yet because they don't know what it's going to be like to have it.
Right.
And with that increased exemption, it's a different strategy. It's let's make sure you're set first.
Yes.
You are the most important piece
yes.
here, and we don't have to do my periodic table of planning, right? We don't have to do that. We can hit just simply the base plan for lots of people and put that in order, which is, I think, important to remember.
Kind of a nice, which I hadn't thought about the implication of the
one big
raise. Yeah. Well, there should be something good.
Yeah. No, and that's been especially for a lot of owners that has, and the fact that it's not we're no longer fearing it's going to go away in January. So
right.
It was going to drop in half in January. We're not fearing it. So, which isn't great for business owners. We need pressure. We need outside pressure points to get them to plan.
Right.
Often.
That's true.
But it's good in the sense that they're not rushing to do something if it.
Well, the pressure can come from different vantage points.
Yeah.
Knowing that you have a timeline before a marketing process, that it is better.
Yes.
Can be the pressure, which makes sense, right? Like if I've already gotten 3 offers with a certain value, kind of the value set.
Yeah.
It's really hard to argue.
Right. But I think it's good. But in thinking about that, you overlay that tax impact, right? Or kind of what's it to do to a person's estate. And if it's it brings in $100 million, okay, we're going to do a lot of planning. If it's 50, it's different. If it's 20, it's different, which is so different than what it was 8 years ago when the exemptions were, well, I guess 9 years ago.
They keep moving.
Yeah. So it brings it into play. That just goes back to the why.
Right.
Why are we doing
this?
What are their goals? Which is again, counseling.
Yep.
Right. To me, that's the fun part.
Well, that's good. Then you're in the right spot.
Right. I think so.
That's a good validation.
Yeah.
So if we're working with the business owner and we're at the point of bringing them to you. And we have Exit Advantage where we work with our clients far in advance, 3 to 5 years. So talk about what is a direct intake. Like I pick up the phone, I call Mike. What are my next steps?
Oof. So the owner's next steps?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you need? What do they need to kind of think about before they call you? And what do they need to have ready?
Yeah. So they should just call. Right?
Okay.
And because I'm going to hear the story, I'm going to ask them questions about their family, their family situation, first marriage, second marriage, kids from different marriages, right? All of that kind of comes into play. We're going to need their demographic information, but then their asset information. Do I need in that initial call, that initial what are we doing? I want to remove the hurdles, right? So I don't want them to have too much to think they need to bring into that conversation.
Absolutely.
We want to start the conversation. Ultimately, yes, like we're going to need to know, their assets, their ownership interests, what sort of LLCs or business entities are in there. But we don't always have to get that from the person, right? Because the best way to keep that person is to let that person continue to run the business.
100%.
Right? So we're going to hit on the accountant. We're going to hit on you, anyone that's in the family already, on the team, to gather some of that information to make it easier. So I'd say let's just jump on the call and walk through it, knowing that yes, at some point I'm going to collect information relating to their assets and their information, but importantly, the family, the kids, hearing the story about the kids. And then they have to think of the who, right? I don't want them to think too much about the who ahead of time in terms of like who they will pick as trustees or the fiduciaries to help run their estates if they're not around, because it will come, some of that will come from the conversation.
Oh, good.
Of whether or not the kids can do it, if they make sense. Is there too much strife with the family business, with a kid in the business or outside of the business? It's going to lead us in different directions. And it's just easier to talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to get the information from them accurately is helpful.
Right. Without somebody else's filter.
Yeah.
Too.
Of
right?
course. Of course.
Sometimes a recent phone call like this, the spouses hadn't like ultimately thought about, and it was a second marriage, children from the prior marriages, and they hadn't actually thought about who was going to get what, who was going to inherit. I'm like, well, like, so there, we had a conversation, we talked a little bit about trust, but ultimately I can't move until we answer that question.
Yeah, right.
Right. Like, but
it gives them a sounding board.
Correct.
To see,
exactly.
Well, what is normally done? Correct. Well, how do I generally think about this?
Which is helpful, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I try to narrow it down to like, one or two things for them to discuss on their own.
That's a good plan.
Right.
That's a good plan.
Make it
too much
keep
at
it
once
manageable.
is bad. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's great. So when we have that meeting, right, we start working on things, how long does it take to be established?
It's a great question. I have an email that I send to clients that are exploring working, and it's like, and there's a sentence or two in there that is like, we're going to meet, we're going to talk, assuming we've come to conclusions. You give me 2 to 3 weeks to draft the documents, review them, and get them out to you. From there,
that seems fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that means we came to a conclusion.
Right.
Right. Like we know what we're doing. Sometimes it takes 3 calls to know what we're doing. Right.
Okay,
Sometimes
fair.
it takes 15 minutes. You don't know. Once we know what we're doing, I don't want to put pen to paper until we
change it. Right.
Right. Like I don't mind if you want to pay hourly. I'll put pen to paper and then we will revise it 100 times. Right.
Yep.
Generally on planning, especially kind of that foundational planning, we can do it some of it on a flat fee basis. And like with that is like, I don't want to start until we know where we're going.
Makes sense.
So 2 to 3 weeks is a good time for us to turn it around. And then it's on you, right? It's, what's your plan? How much attention are you going to pay to it? I mean, if it's a base plan for a client, the document they get is 200 pages with all sorts of information, right? I don't really want them to read it yet. The front of it's a flow chart, right? And then there's a memo, depending on that client's personality type. Some read the whole thing, some like the memo, some like the flow chart. I want you to sit on it, look at it, look through the flow chart, and then we jump on another call. We walk through it. We hit the pivot points. That's kind of on the base planning, right? The foundational planning. On the owner planning, it takes a little more, like the trust is easy. Once we figure out what you want, who's going to be the beneficiary, who are going to be the trustees, that's easy. It's the other stuff that's hard. It's the how much are we transferring?
Right.
Is it
getting your valuation done?
Is it? Yeah. How do we actually make the transfer? If it's an LLC and other people do we have to amend the operating agreement? So
all the
people have to consent to the amendment. Those other things are harder to predict.
Okay.
If your owner walked in and said, we're going to start marketing this in a month, can we make a gift, next week? Like, sure. Like we can help, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this week would be bad because I'm going to a conference next week, so it'll be a little harder. But yeah,
pick your week wisely.
It's possible, right? It's not ideal.
Okay.
And what I say in those situations is you have to listen to me. Right? Like you are getting
choices.
The best plan. You may actually be getting the plan we would get anyway. Right?
Right.
But we have less time. Right? So we have to be flexible. We have to do the best. We're going to use our best practices. We're going to make it as flexible as possible so things can be tweaked later.
Oh, excellent.
But
that's a good point.
If you need fast, like we still have to give you excellence.
Right. Right.
Which means if we have to move over, it's not going to be as customized as it would be if you were taking longer.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense.
It's the push and pull, right?
Yeah, of course. Of course. What's more important to me right now?
Exactly.
That's kind of where these things land. Well, thank you for coming. Absolutely. I'm going to end with our last question, which is kind of standard for everybody.
Uh-oh.
If you are not doing this for a career, what would career option 2 look like for you? It's
money, and if money's no option, I am somewhere coaching something. No idea what it is.
Like a sport
or any. I mean, in some ways, not unlike you, I'm a coach every day.
Right.
Right. That's kind of how I think of it. Whether it's working with my colleagues and leading the department, whether it's working with clients, it's coaching them. I just exited my last summer of coaching little kids baseball, probably.
Oh, congratulations.
So which is neat, but like I'm hitting that transition of next summer, probably not having that anymore. And like, what's that void? So something using that coaching mentality.
Excellent. Yeah. It's amazing to see those of us that are professionals and do the kind of the coaching mentality. We tend to have an entrepreneurial attitude towards things. I would bet you fill that summer coaching time effectively with something different.
Absolutely. Let's hope. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, this was fun.